it's provided by different scholars, okay? So we said that one of the factors that affects, do you remember, I said it even in the beginning, one of the factors that affects the learning, the teaching culture process or the learning of a new culture is the situation in which culture is taught. And we had, according to Stern, 3 situations. That is, culture is taught in the language classroom, okay? Culture is taught in the language, is taught in the culture setting, and culture is taught in order to, let's say, prepare students for a visit or for, let's say, it is culture taught for specific purposes, okay? And we said that in the first setting or situation in which the culture is taught in language courses, the main focus is not culture, but it is language, okay? But the idea that is that cultural information, it is a background information. So they learn culture through the language teaching process or language learning process. The second situation is that culture is taught to prepare students for a visit, to work in the target culture, and so on. And this is done to avoid the cultural shock, okay, whenever they are, let's say, faced to the target culture. And we said that here students are far away, physically far away from the target culture, but mentally they are close to the target culture, okay? So they somehow are pre-prepared for visiting or for facing the target culture. And the last situation is that culture is taught in the cultural setting, that is immigrants, for example. Immigrants are faced and learn the culture by facing it directly. It's not they are pre-prepared, so they go and they know which situation they will face and how they need to act and so on. They learn culture by facing the culture at the same time. Now we will go to the checklists, first of all, that we mentioned, HUGS checklists, and then we have the approaches which are, let's say, used or defined by the situation in which we teach culture. The most common approaches are the monocultural approach, which you might understand it's an approach which focuses on a single culture, and it is also called the 4Fs culture, which means that the teacher teaches the 4F aspects, that is fairs, festivals, films, which are very, let's say, the most common fairs, festivals, and films of the target culture. Now this is somehow considered as inadequate from scholars, because they said that the main focus here is on the target culture. But what we said before, we need to, first of all, focus on the own culture, then to teach the target culture. The second is the comparative approach. Now, the comparative approach to compare cultures. But the idea is to compare, not to say which is better and which is worse, okay? The idea is to make a balance, let's say, between two cultures, and let's see the differences, but never say which is best and which is worse, because we know students will have the tendency to consider their own culture as being the best, okay? So we should try, that is why we should try to avoid these comparisons, okay? Next is the intercultural approach, okay, which consists of focusing on the interrelation between two cultures. So here we do not have, let's say, the overestimation of the target culture, nor the over-evaluation or estimation of their own culture, but we have, let's say, a balance between two cultures. We study the relationship between two cultures, the similarities and the differences between these two cultures. Next is the multicultural approach. This is very, especially in America, this is approach widely used, because in America, as you may know, classrooms are characterized by having, let's say, students coming from different cultural backgrounds. So we have multicultural classrooms, and this is why we say that this is the best approach to be used or to be followed, okay? That is, several cultures exist within one culture. So the teacher's duty is somehow more difficult in this case, because she needs to, first of all, respect all the cultures, and to, let's say, not overestimate or over-evaluate none of the cultures. She needs to be unbiased, And this is very difficult. And she also needs to, let's say, avoid misunderstandings and even conflicts, because having different cultural backgrounds might cause that the students may have conflicts, okay? And the last one is the theme-based approach. That is, they are based on a certain theme, let's say weddings, okay? So the teacher is based on such theme and develops the lecture basing on that theme. If you remember, we also mentioned the problem-oriented approach. That is, the teacher presents to the students a certain problem, a certain situation, and let the students or ask the students for a solution to this problem, okay? But what is important is that the teacher should be very careful in picking the problem that is needed to be solved, okay? Because the problem might arouse different conflicts among the students, or students might sometimes feel discriminated, for example, because of the problem. Let's say, if we have a multicultural classroom, we should avoid, or at least studies suggest that we should avoid topics such as racism or discrimination, for example, because having such students, they are very affected by this topic, and the possibility of having conflicts is greater, okay? Then we have the skill-centered approach, which is more practical. That is, the teacher focuses on the skills or on the main skills of the students, and thus the teaching process it's much easier for the teacher. Why? Because considering the skills of the students, the teacher knows which is the best way, for example, through which Fatmir learns a certain topic, and which is the best way in which through which Elvisa learns a new topic or takes in or acquires information. So, but this is a great challenge on the other side, because it is very difficult for the teacher to find out the skills of every student, okay? And it is the most difficult thing to let's say, find a way in which balances equally the skills of each student. So we need to be very careful in this aspect. Now, let's go on to the criteria included in the checklist. If you remember, we spoke about textbooks which are used, and we said that textbooks are globally textbooks or local textbooks, okay? And we said that global textbooks are textbooks which are produced or published for the global market, okay? And they are generally or mainly produced for teaching language, not teaching culture. Anyway, the cultural information serves as a cultural background. Then we said that we also have local text books. Now, the idea is that we tried to make a comparison which textbooks are better for teaching language, are best for teaching language and culture at least, okay? So these checklists highlight or analyze what elements, cultural elements, do these textbooks include, and why should a certain textbook be included in the language teaching process to teach culture, and why not, okay? So Hux presented some criteria or some elements in his checklist, and he said that these textbooks should be factual and up-to-date, which means that we should present the real circumstances, the real setting of the target culture, or the real target culture. Sorry, the target culture. Another thing is that the stereotypes should be avoided, of course. We said that this might cause conflicts among students. And we should try, or textbooks should try to depict the realistic image or picture of the target culture, okay? So we said that some of the textbooks only include, only the positive aspects of the target culture. They did not include, the unemployment or poverty or poor people or discrimination or criminal cases and so on. So Hux considers important that even such cases should be included in these textbooks.
Monocular, dat we nu nu, dat geeft me als een